Hi there. In this lesson, we're going to look at some harder percentages to work out. So if you haven't looked at the previous easier lessons and medium lessons, I would advise you to look at the earlier video lessons. So again, as before, I would say maybe copy this table out into your jotter, put in your basic percentages as fractions, because once you've got percentages, fractions, it's easier to work them out. There is some repeat here, for example, the red ones, but the rest are a wee bit newer. Now the same idea as before applies. Percent is out of 100, and to work out a percent as a fraction, you say how many times does that number go into 100. So for example, 1% goes into 100 times, so the fraction is 100. So if you had to work out 1%, just divide the number by 100. Now 3%, 3 doesn't go into 100, but what we can do is we can multiply up the 1% to get 3%, because 3% is 3 times that. So that's just 3 100s. So to work out 3%, you divide by 100 and then times it by 3. The same can be seen for 7%. 7% is 7 hundredths, 7 lots of 1%. So divide by 100 and then times by 7. Okay, leading on from there, I'm going to jump a wee bit to 0.5%. Now, if we know 1%, you could find 1% and then half it, divided by 2. So finding 1% and then halving it will get you 0.5%. Finding 1.5%, there's a few ways of doing it. You could find 1%, then you could find 0.5% and add them together. But I would find 3% and then half it. I think that's the easiest way to go here. But there's various ways of doing percentages, and finding 1% and then 0.5% and adding it's absolutely fine. Again, with this one, there's different ways of doing it, but I would probably find 25% and half it. I think that would be the easiest thing to do. Okay, 33 and a third, we just said that was a third because that goes into 100 3 times, and this one's double that, so we knew that from before. To find the 12%, that's it's really called building blocks. Find 10% first, and then find 2% using this technique and add them together. And you'll see that in a second when I go into the actual calculations. Same with 18%, find 10% first, and then find 8% and add them together, and that'll build you up to 18%. So you can build percentages up. It'd be the same for 23%, for example. Get 20%, get 3%, and add them together. They're kind of like more than one step's required. Right, let's look at some harder examples. I've got some examples here to go over and see how you do this. So, first question, work out 3% of 100. Now we know 3% is 3 100ths, so divide by 100 and then times by 3. So you take your £800, divide it by 100 and times it by 3. Now that bit's easy because that's just 8. So it's 8 times 3, which is 24. It'll be £24 there we should be putting. To get 6%, it's the same idea. Divide by 100 to get 1% and then times by 6. So you're doing 700 divided by 100 and then you're timesing it by 6. Again, this bit's easy, it's just 7. So it's 7 times 6, which is 42. Again, 42 centimetres. Last one's very similar here. Divide by 100 to get 1% and then times by 4. So you take 190, divide by 100 and times it by 4. 190 divided by 100, so divide by 10 twice, so you get 19, divide 19 by 10 and you get 1.9. So it's really 1.9 times 4. You can do a sum up and down if you want. 4 9s are 36 and then carry the 3 and 4 1s are 4, but it comes to 7.6. But feel free to do a wee sum at the side because there's no calculator involved here. Right, let's look at some harder ones in terms of the building block ones. So finding 12% of £400. So the first thing I would do is get 10%, because that's quite close to it. So 10%, just divide by 10 to get 10%. So that gives you £40. And then to get 2%, well, you divide this by 100 and times it by 2. So divide by 100 gives you 4, double it will give you £8. So 12% is kind of combination of 10 plus 2, isn't it? So you take your £40 from the 10%, your £8 from the 2, and you add them together. You get £48. This idea is similar, so to get 17% of 300, get 10% first, so divide by 10. To get the 7%, you take your 300 again, you divide it by 100 to get 1% and times it by 7, so divide it by 100 and times it by 7, so that's going to give you 3 times 7, which is 21. And then 17% is made up of a combination of those two added together, isn't it? So your £30 and your £21, and that gives you £51. Okay, a few to finish. Let's look at finding a 0.5% of this number here, 1,200. So I would get 1% first, just divided by 100, and that gives you £12, and then half a percent is half of that, so £6, and you're done. To find 4.5%, I'm going to show you two techniques. The first one I would say is get 9%. So divide this by 100 and times by 9. So that's going to be 6 times 9, isn't it? Which is 54. And then if you half 9%, you're going to get 4.5%. So if you half the £54, you get £27, and that's your answer. Now, as I said before, there's various ways of doing this. That you don't have to do my technique there. Another example would be to work out 4% first. You could do 600 divided by 100 times by 4. That's going to give you 24, isn't it? Because 600 divided by 106 times 4 is 24. And then you could find a 0.5%. So divide it by 100 to get 1%, and then divide it by 2. That would give you 3. So if you add these two together, you get your £27. So remember, percentages sometimes there's various ways of getting them.